Brothers, I'm back with another horror film. Today, it's still the American horror series, Mortuary Collection. This film is composed of 4 seemingly independent stories, paying tribute to classic works like Creepshow and The Ring, while also incorporating the director's reflections on karma. Through a series of supernatural events in the mortuary, it reveals the evil in human nature. The old master is the owner of a morgue. On this day, he had just finished a funeral for a deceased child when he discovered a girl had barged in. She claimed she wanted to apply for the assistant position. After hearing these, the old master first gave a meaningful smile, then eagerly took her to tour the morgue. There were thousands of old books stored here, but they didn't contain ordinary text. Instead, Xiaomei became interested and wanted Lao Shuai to tell her a client's story. As Lao Shuai stood up, the first story slowly began. The woman in front of her went to the bathroom, and the moment she turned on the light, she noticed her hands were covered in a sticky liquid. The woman didn't pay much attention to it, sat down on the toilet, checked the stolen wallet thoroughly, and after looking at the exquisite pocket watch, she was satisfied and ready to leave. It seems she gained quite a bit tonight. Just as the woman was about to leave, she noticed the medicine cabinet behind the mirror and thought there might be treasures inside. Holding on to the idea of not leaving empty-handed, she pried open the lock with a knife, but accidentally cut her finger with too much force. As she lowered her head to wipe the blood, the door she had just opened suddenly slammed shut, completely piquing her curiosity. A piercing scream echoed in the confined space as the woman desperately used her body to hold the cabinet door shut. She hadn't expected a terrifying creature to be inside. Moments later, the cabinet suddenly fell silent. The woman called out loudly, hoping to attract attention from outside, but received no response, so she tiptoed away, preparing to leave. Countless tentacles grabbed her, and the woman tried to struggle, but her spine was snapped, and she stopped breathing. The tentacles leisurely dragged her into the cabinet, and the bathroom returned to silence. A tentacle reached out and turned off the light. Old Shuai finished his story, and Xiaomei listened with great interest, showing no fear at all, which left Old Shuai somewhat frustrated. He said the main point of a story is not the content, but the meaning it contains. Saying this, Lao Shuai handed the employment contract to Xiaomei, who signed her name without much hesitation, saying that such stories are just to scare kids from stealing, and she hoped Lao Shuai could tell a more thrilling one. Lao Shuai led her to the foyer, and Xiaomei noticed a black and white photo on the wall, with Lao Shuai prominently in the center. She couldn't help but ask, how old is Old Shuai this year? Old Shuai didn't answer directly and then started telling Xiaomei the second story. This time, the protagonist was a student named Xiao Shuai. During his university years, Xiao Shuai joined an organization called the Matthews Brotherhood, which prided itself on getting girls pregnant. As one of the outstanding members, Xiao Shuai, with his naturally handsome looks and smooth-talking skills, took the virginity of 66 girls. Just one more, and he could rise to the top of the Matthews Brotherhood and become the leader. That day, he set his sights on a new girl, Sweetie, and eagerly invited her to the evening party. Sweetie readily agreed. In the evening, Sweetie arrived as promised, and the two began a deep conversation. Knowing the brothers aren't interested in watching, I won't show this part. When little Shuai woke up again, he felt refreshed, with no back pain, no leg pain, and even had more energy walking. After getting up, Xiao Shuai saw the phone number Tianmei left for him in the mirror. He decisively wiped it off with his hand because, to him, women are like clothes, never to be worn twice. Just then, Xiao Shuai suddenly felt a wave of nausea and couldn't help but rush into the bathroom, where he was overcome with a bout of vomiting. At this moment, a classmate came to ask about last night's situation, asking if he had taken any protective measures. Xiao Shuai proudly said no. A classmate, somewhat envious, reminded him to be careful, then turned and left. After he left, Xiao Shuai immediately took off his pants, revealing large red rashes on his abdomen, and he panicked, rushing to the hospital for a checkup. He thought he might have contracted AIDS, but when the doctor saw the test results, he was stunned. Meanwhile, strange noises came from Xiao Shuai's stomach, scaring the doctor into grabbing a bucket and running away. After he left, Xiao Shuai was also dumbfounded, looking at his test results, which actually said he was pregnant. After returning home, his belly kept swelling like an inflated balloon. Xiao Shuai realized that all of this must be related to Tianmei, and fortunately, the number on the mirror wasn't completely wiped off. I had tried many times and finally got through to the girl's phone, saying he wanted to meet her. The girl didn't think much of it, gave him the address, and hung up. By the time he arrived at her house, his belly was too big to hide. Her parents helped him onto a special chair and told him this was a normal thing. Xiao Shuai broke down and said, "What kind of family are you? Who told you it's normal for men to have babies?" At this moment, Sweet Girl also came down, glanced at Xiao Shuai's huge belly, and couldn't help but complain, "Why didn't you use a condom last night?" Xiao Shuai felt like dying, repeatedly bowing his head to admit his mistake, but it was too late to change anything. Sweet Girl's parents said that now the only option is to have the baby.
How is this gonna work? Where's it gonna come out? It's gonna come out the same way it got in.
As soon as the words were spoken, Xiaoshuai's little body instantly felt immense pressure. As he cried out in pain, a baby was born from his belly. The sweet mother took the baby to the attic to settle it, and as she left, countless cries of babies echoed, sending chills down one's spine. After hearing this story, Xiaomei was extremely satisfied and couldn't wait for Lao Shuai to tell the next story. However, at this moment, a strange noise came from the coffin, startling Xiaomei, and Lao Shuai silently appeared behind her, leading Xiaomei to the specimen room. Here lies a female corpse, very young, yet she developed bed sores, and on her finger, she wore a ring engraved with "parted only by death." Then old Shui began to tell the story of the female corpse. Her name was Sister Ka, and her husband's name was Little Fatty. Not long after they got married, Sister K was afflicted with a strange illness and collapsed in bed. She had completely lost consciousness and could only survive with the help of a ventilator. At first, Little Fatty was quite good to Sister Ka, but as time went by, he could no longer endure the oppressive atmosphere of having a bedridden patient at home all year round. Especially when he returned home exhausted from grocery shopping and heard neighbors talking about their recent leisure trips, Little Fatty's sense of imbalance grew even more severe. Every day he rushed between work and family without a moment to catch his breath. Each day he was either feeding his wife or spending money on medicine and doctors. That day a doctor came to the house, heard Xiaopang's complaints, and handed him a bottle of medicine. Hearing the implication in the doctor's words, Xiaopang was tempted. Late at night, he moved his wife to the dining table and specially presented her with a carefully prepared gift, a small rabbit ornament. Kaka still gave no reaction. Xiaopang went completely mad. He unhesitatingly took out the medicine, mixed it into Kaka's food, and then personally fed it to her. Unexpectedly, after Kaka finished eating, her hand suddenly moved. Seeing Kaji in pain, Xiaopang regretted it and immediately untied the straps on her, allowing her to vomit out what she had eaten. However, just as he turned around, Kaji's head suddenly drooped and the sharp craft hit her forehead, causing a lot of blood to flow out. Xiaopang was so frightened that he didn't know what to do and quickly called the doctor. The doctor, however, told him that since the person was dead, he might as well throw her into the sea to feed the fish, to avoid being discovered by the police. Little Fatty didn't want to go to jail. He had finally gotten rid of his wife and had a great life ahead to enjoy, so he immediately followed the doctor's instructions, found the biggest box in the house, and moved Sister Ka into it. But the box was too small, and Sister Ka's legs were still sticking out. Little Fatty had a sudden idea and thought of dismemberment. The intense pain made Sister Ka let out her final scream, but Little Fatty had already made up his mind. He tied it directly to Sister Ka's leg and dragged the box into the elevator. Unexpectedly, at this moment, a neighbor also came out. Feeling guilty, Little Fatty ignored the neighbor's attempt to stop him and ruthlessly closed the elevator door. As a result, the elevator malfunctioned at that moment. Xiaopang didn't dare to call the police at all. He could only force open a crack, trying to crawl out, but with his size, he couldn't get through. At this moment, Xiaopang looked back and noticed a large amount of blood seeping from the box. He thought of escaping through the ventilation duct, but couldn't open the duct cover. The strong smell of blood spread in the elevator, and Xiaopang's sanity was on the verge of collapse. He took off the wedding ring and smashed it on the ground. If he had known marriage would be this painful, he would rather have never been with Sister Ka. Hearing his complaint, the box containing Sister Ka's body parts suddenly opened. The next moment, the elevator suddenly plummeted, continuing downward after reaching the first floor, as if it was dragging him into hell. The former Kajiya stared at him intently as he was lifted into the air. Kajiya slowly crawled out of the box, picked up the wedding ring from the floor, and placed it back on his hand. Kajiya, in a white dress, held him tightly. Shortly after, the police arrived and found him already mentally deranged, clutching a wedding photo and muttering to himself. Xiaomei said that this story is not satisfying enough, as Xiaopang has sacrificed for love for so long and hasn't done anything wrong. However, Lao Shuai disagreed, stating that everyone's fate is already determined, and good and evil will be rewarded accordingly. This is a truth that Lao Shuai has always firmly believed in. Old Shuai brought Xiaomei to the court area of the house, the crematorium, where he was preparing to cremate the recently deceased child, but was unexpectedly stopped by Xiaomei. It turned out Xiaomei was not there for a job interview. She was there to see the child one last time. Then she shared her story with the child. But to understand the story of Xiaomei and the child, we must first talk about a notorious local mental patient. After escaping from the mental hospital, he took pleasure in killing children and was called the Swamp Crooked Tooth Immortal by the locals, because every time he killed a child, he would take one of the child's teeth as a souvenir. Xiaomei was a family nanny, and the deceased child was the son of her employer. That night, while Xiaomei was looking after the child at her employer's house, she received a voice message from her employer saying they might be home late and hoped Xiaomei could check on the child upstairs. When Xiaomei went upstairs, she found the child still asleep. She turned around and went downstairs, turned on the kitchen sound system, increased the volume, and started cooking. At this moment, a news flash interrupted the TV program, saying that the security system of the mental hospital had malfunctioned and a murderer had escaped. However, Xiaomei didn't hear it and turned to go outside to throw out the trash. Unexpectedly, when she returned to the room, a man with a face covered in blood was standing inside. Xiao Mei kindly wanted to bandage the man, but the phone rang. It was the boy's parents calling, reminding Xiao Mei to protect the child. Upon hearing the word child, the man's expression changed instantly. However, before he could react, Xiao Mei took the initiative and pressed his hand into the meat grinder. Then she found a knife and stabbed at the man, but was knocked to the ground in return. Strangely, the man took the initiative to make a call. After the call connected, Xiao Mei lunged forward and bit off one of the man's ears. Xiao Mei was also knocked unconscious. She fell into a deep sleep and dreamed about how the swamp crooked tooth fairy killed the child. She was startled awake. Suddenly, there was a noise upstairs, and Xiao Mei picked up a weapon and went over. The man had already reached the boy's room, but didn't find the boy himself. At this moment, the lights in the room suddenly dimmed, and amidst the thunder and lightning, they fought again. After an unknown amount of time, Xiao Mei crawled out of the room, barely alive, only to be pinned to the ground by the man. At this point, the employers, a couple, also returned, but the door was locked from the inside and they couldn't get in. Xiao Mei, who was pinned to the ground, seemed to have lost all hope, but she suddenly said to the man, "You're not a murderer." The man, as if waking from a dream, walked to the stairs, seemingly frightened by Xiao Mei's words. Xiao Mei seized the opportunity and pushed the man down the stairs without hesitation. Then she walked downstairs and said to the man, "This is for ruining my dinner." Not long after, the employers entered through the back door, and the man had already become a cold corpse. Now at this moment, the blood-stained TV broadcast a report, and Xiao Mei's photo appeared on the screen. It turned out the man was the family's nanny, and Xiao Mei was the notorious tooth fairy. The employer couple came to the kitchen and smelled the aroma coming from the oven. When they opened it, the charred body inside was shockingly their son, the boy who was now about to be cremated in the coffin. Old Shuai suddenly realized that at this point, Xiao Mei was no longer pretending. Her real purpose for coming here was to pull out the boy's teeth. Immediately, Xiao Mei stabbed old Shuai with a knife.
In real life, the bad guy wins.
Unexpectedly, the old man who was stabbed to death by her stood up the next moment and let out a terrifying laugh, indicating that now it was Xiao Mei's turn to dismember herself. Xiao Mei didn't believe in the supernatural and still thought about running away, but she couldn't escape this eerie house. In her panic, she ended up in the library where the old man appeared. As his cane struck the ground, books fell from the shelves, recording the stories of the children harmed by Xiao Mei. As one child baby after another crawled out of hell, Xiao Mei was cornered, trapped in a desperate situation. Those children bit into Xiao Mei's body, retrieving their own teeth from her. Old Shuai calmly stitched Xiao Mei's body back together. After finishing all this, Old Shuai got ready and left the house. It turns out he was also a monster, accidentally trapped here years ago, and could only leave by finding a successor. Now with Xiao Mei's arrival, the house has a new owner. However, just as he was basking in the sunlight, his body suddenly turned to ashes. His story has ended, but Xiao Mei's story is just beginning. As the recruitment sign outside fell, Xiao Mei will be eternally trapped here, continuing to write more death stories.